Howdy folks, hope you're all having a good one, and welcome back once again to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles. Today, for your viewing entertainment, we have a Tier 8 battle on the Crash Zone Alpha map, starring Stealin in the US Navy Tier 8 fast battleship, the beautiful USS North Carolina. Well, I say fast battleship, and technically she was. She's not actually that fast by World of Warships battleship standards. She has a top speed of 28 knots. But that makes her feel like a bloody speedboat compared to the battleships like the New Mexico, the New York and the Colorado that you've had to grind out in order to get here. The speed of the North Carolina really is a breath of fresh air. And for those US battleship players who are wondering when they're going to get to the pork chops, this is it. Tier 8 and the North Carolina. It really is a fantastic ship. I should probably point out that her top speed here in game is only 27.5 knots, and you want to get that once you've researched and installed the upgraded engine. I don't know why they decided to knock half a knot off her top speed, which was listed at 28 knots, or about 54 kilometers per hour or 32 miles per hour. But yeah, it is what it is. And I'm sure for those of you who've been crawling around at 18.8 knots in the Colorado, you're not going to argue about half a knot here or there when you can do faster than 27 knots in the North Carolina. I should point out that this game does have a slow start. Stealin here isn't going to be doing anything particularly imaginative or aggressive in the first 5 or 6 minutes of this match. He's just biding his time, shooting at whatever targets he can, and waiting for the right opportunity to make his move. But trust me, once he starts going for it, you'll know. So while we wait for things to get going, let's have a little chat about the USS North Carolina herself. Pennant number BB-55, she was the lead ship in the North Carolina class of battleships, although she only had one sister ship, the USS Washington. She was originally designed under the constraints of the Washington Naval Treaty and was supposed to be armed with 14-inch guns, but America took advantage of a clause in the London Naval Treaty to change this and arm her with 9 16-inch guns instead. The adoption of 16-inch guns on the North Carolina class was actually a huge source of potential political trouble at the time. President Roosevelt went on record as saying, I quote, "I am not willing that the United States be the first naval power to adopt the 16-inch gun. Because of the international importance of the United States not being the first to change the principles laid down in the Washington and London treaties, it seems to me that the plans for the two new battleships should contemplate the 14-inch gun." President Roosevelt's Secretary of State Cordell Hull at one point sent a telegram to the US ambassador in Tokyo instructing him that the USA would accept a cap of 14-inch guns if the ambassador could get Japan to agree to this as well. The Japanese replied that they simply wouldn't accept this unless the number of battleships was also limited. Japan wanted the USA and the United Kingdom to agree to having an equal number of battleships with Japan, but this was something that had already been ruled out in existing naval treaties and was therefore something that neither the USA nor the UK were going to agree to. This was more than a little cheeky of the Japanese, since at that time in 1937 they were already about to start construction of the Yamato in secret and the Musashi. So they knew full well that they were about to breach all of the treaties that they had signed, but were at the same time trying to get America and Britain to agree to additional stipulations above and beyond the treaties that the Japanese were about to break anyway. Needless to say, neither Britain nor the USA were prepared to agree to allow Japan to build additional battleships, even though, unbeknownst to them, Japan was basically doing this anyway. Super battleships like the Yamato and the Musashi that completely breached every existing treaty limitation. When Japan formally rejected the 14-inch gun limit under the terms of the Second London Naval Treaty, this allowed France, the UK and the United States to activate something that was known as the escalator clause and raise the limit of their guns from 14 to 16 inches if Japan or Italy had refused to sign the treaty after the 1st of April 1937. All of which meant that on the 10th of July 1937, President Roosevelt reluctantly directed that the North Carolinas both be armed with 3 batteries of triple 16-inch guns. When the news that the USA was going to adopt 16-inch guns reached Japan, Tokyo newspapers printed this news alongside pictures of American warships aiming their guns at Japan. One of the other reasons why Roosevelt was so reluctant to activate the escalator clause and go with the 16-inch gun limit was because he didn't want to touch off another international naval arms race, featuring bigger and bigger ships with bigger and bigger guns. If that happened, the USA could find itself at a disadvantage in one of two ways. Either their battleships would be built to have a Panama Canal capability, rendering them inferior to the new ships of other nations, or they'd be designed to be on par with the other nation ships, meaning that they wouldn't be able to use the Panama Canal and would have to sail around Cape Horn if they wanted to get from one side of the USA to the other. There ended up being 35 different proposed design specifications for the two warships that would become the North Carolina class. It turns out that designing and building battleships is actually really hard. And in fact, the North Carolina would be the first battleship built by the USA since the ill-fated South Dakota class of the 1920s that were laid down but never completed. The USS North Carolina was ordered on the 1st of August 1937. Her keel was laid down at the New York Naval Shipyard on the 27th of October 1937, and she was launched on the 13th of June 1940. Technically, if you ask the USA, before the outbreak of World War II. Although, if you were to ask anybody from France, Germany, Belgium, the UK, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, India, Italy, Poland, Luxembourg, Norway, they'd probably all have radically different opinions on the subject. And in fact, if you were prepared to give it another 2 weeks, Russia would probably have things to say about the exact start date of World War II as well. But that's the thing about the start date of World War II. I mean, traditionally, it's accepted as being September 1939, when Germany invaded Poland. If you ask the USA, it was the 7th of December 1941, when the Japanese launched the sneak attack on the US fleet at Pearl Harbor. But if you accept that the Japanese were belligerents in World War II, what about the Chinese who'd been fighting the Japanese since 1931? Or the poor old Koreans who'd been invaded and occupied by Japan in 1910 and would remain so for the next 35 years? Simple questions like when did World War II start really aren't very simple at all and depend entirely on who you're asking. Although I'm pretty sure you're all going to have plenty to say in the comments section of this video on this particular subject, and I have to admit I am kind of looking forward to hearing what it is that you have to say. Meanwhile, the friendly La Galissoniere over there is in such a rush to avoid getting shot at anymore, he's not really watching where he's going. Stealin slams the brakes on to let him go past, and La Galissoniere apologises, it was a simple mistake. No harm, no foul. Now, when it comes to the North Carolina's service in World War II, if you're expecting any major fleet engagements, the likes of Jutland or Matapan, I'm afraid we're in the wrong ocean for that sort of thing. North Carolina was a battleship, and the war in the Pacific was ruled by the aircraft carriers. Not that there weren't any major fleet engagements involving things that weren't aircraft carriers. The battle off Savo Island, for example, but that was a mostly cruiser engagement. Then, of course, there was the Battle of the Surigao Strait. Whoa! Okay, if you were wondering when Stealin was actually going to start getting stuck into this battle, it's now. But yes, Pacific World War II surface engagements. Battle of the Surigao Strait, when Admiral Jesse Oldendorf's Pearl Harbor veteran battle wagons utterly obliterated a major Japanese surface force during a night action. The North Carolina's sister ship, the USS Washington, was also involved in a night action during the Guadalcanal campaign against Japanese battleships. But as far as the North Carolina was concerned, she would get into no such actions. That's not that she didn't do anything during World War II, she absolutely did. She took part in the Guadalcanal campaign, the Gilbert and Marshall Islands campaign, the Mariana and Palau Islands campaign. She also took part in the invasions of Iwo Jima and Okinawa, but it was mostly a case of using her main battery guns for shore bombardment duties and then using her anti-aircraft guns to provide fleet cover during later operations. Holy shit, yeah, he's dead. The Duke of York's dead. Any second now, there it is. So it's pretty much here where Stealin starts going for it and then basically never stops. 88,000 damage done, he sunk a Duke of York, and that has effectively cleared this flank of anything other than enemy aircraft. Now the Massachusetts over there the third of 4 South Dakota class battleships, not to be confused with the uncompleted 1920s South Dakota design. These were the 1939 South Dakotas, 4 of them built, the South Dakota, the Indiana, the Massachusetts over there, and the Alabama, also available in World of Warships. Very, very similar to the North Carolinas. They were designed to the same treaty displacement of 35,000 long tons, and they had the same main battery of 9 16-inch 45 caliber Mark VI guns. Looking at them, people can often find it very hard to tell the difference between a North Carolina or a South Dakota like the Massachusetts over there. The simplest way to tell is the Massachusetts only has 1 funnel, and the North Carolinas have 2. The other main difference here in World of Warships is the guns. The North Carolina's main batteries are normally pretty accurate. Normally, but not all the time. Whereas the Massachusetts aren't. But the Massachusetts is infamous for having deadly secondaries. Now, I'm not entirely sure why the Massachusetts has come out from behind the island like that. I mean, he's busy bow tanking a Mutsu in front of him, which is also armed with 16-inch guns. But he was safe from things like this happening until he moved out to meet the Mutsu. And there's Stealin's second kill as he turns in to avoid getting too much damage from the Karga's airdropped torpedoes, taking only 1 off, and the Karga's coming in from the other side. The kill on the Massachusetts has put Stealin's team ahead by 1 kill, and they really need those points because at the moment they only have 1 cap circle, and the enemy team are about to finish taking their 3rd. The Karga managed to disable his rudder with the torpedo attack from the rear, which was kind of lucky. But it did also cause a flood, and so Stealin has decided that he could do without the extra damage, and he would really like the rudder back, so he's used his damage control. At the time I thought, yeah, that makes sense, he's unlikely to get torpedoed again anytime soon, and nobody's firing high explosive at him, and oh, there's a very suspicious looking smoke screen over there that I think is hiding a Kutuzov, and that could be bad. Even worse is that the team have just lost their kill advantage, because the Mutsu, who was on very low health after dueling the Massachusetts, has just gone down, and yep, there's the fire. And it's going to be a permanent fire, because its damage control's on cooldown. Because getting shot at by 2 high explosive spamming Soviet cruisers would probably mean a 2nd or 3rd fire, and that would be really bad. Don't get me wrong, I like the shawls, but it is made of paper. Speaking of ships that are made of paper, what on earth is this Pensacola doing? Oh, no, 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 Pensacola. You don't want to do that. Not at this kind of range. Not against North Carolina. And... and there's the high caliber award. Right, who wants some more of this? I see the Kutuzov. I'm assuming it's the Kutuzov, due to the number of shells and how often they're being fired, but he's gonna have to, yeah, he's already running into problems with his shots being occluded by the island there. There's a New Mexico giving a lovely broadside for these 16-inch rifles to shoot at. Front turret's out, and oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, there's the Confederate award. Oh, and there's the implacable talent. So that must mean Admiral Halsey is on the flag bridge, and that means that these guns are now reloading 20% faster. Karga's coming in again. Is the New Mexico gonna die? Looks like he's trying to heal up, and there's an extremely brave Atlanta charging in, but let's just make sure of things. And claim the Kraken unleashed. Right. So in the space of about a minute, he's just earned Devastating Strike, High Caliber, Confederate, Kraken Unleashed. He knows there's a Kutuzov lurking around the far side of that island. Yep, there he is. Now, I have to admit, I cannot remember whether or not the Kutuzov has a 25 or 27mm bow. And that's important, because if it's a 25mm bow, the North Carolina's 16-inch guns can overmatch it and citadel her from the front, but if it's a 27mm bow, it can't. And judging by the way he's wavering, it looks like Stealin can't make his mind up either. But then I remembered the other thing about the Kutuzov. It's got torpedoes. Now they're very short-range torpedoes, but they're very powerful torpedoes. And I think Stealin's just remembered this too, because he's waiting for the Kutuzov to try to get the torpedoes away, and then he deletes it from the surface of the ocean. And what even are those torpedoes anyway? Oh, actually, looking at the mini-map, there is a Warspite not too far away. He might have been trying to get the Warspite. Newsflash, he doesn't. That was a complete waste of a Tier 8 cruiser. Then again, given that the Kutuzov there was the third last surviving ship on his team, it's possible that he thought he could maybe torpedo the Warspite and then swing back in and ram Stealin's North Carolina. It's possible, but we'll never know because he utterly failed at it. But hey, at least he went down fighting. That just leaves the enemy carrier, the Kaga, who's coming in to try his luck again, and doesn't realise it, but he's about to add another medal to Stealin's haul. Something that's not too difficult to achieve when there's a Kaga around, because it gets a lot of aircraft. But they're kind of low tier and they don't have a huge amount of health. So it doesn't take much when there's a Kaga on the enemy team for you to also earn the Air Defence Expert Award, to go with the Devastating Strike, High Caliber, Confederate, Kraken Unleashed. Have I missed anything? No, I think that's it. There is also a Gnevny lurking around here somewhere as well. A pretty quick Soviet destroyer, but it's only tier 6. And it is completely incapable of getting stealth torpedo attacks away because its torpedoes only have a 4-kilometer range. Oh, there he is. Oof. I don't know, the range seems... And he is hauling ass. He's got his engine boost active. But, well, this is the North Carolina. And these guns are pretty accurate. Kill number 7. That just leaves the Kaga. And there he is, flat broadside on, well within gun range. The Kaga, of course, based on the hull of the Tosa-class dreadnought battleships, so sufficiently armoured that there should be no chance that any of these 16-inch armour-piercing shells are going to overpenetrate. Well, honestly, what were you expecting? This is, after all, World of Aircraft Carriers. You're not supposed to be able to sink them. Anyway, we'll cut a actually quite short story, even shorter. He completely fails to sink the Kaga, because this is World of Aircraft Carriers and you're not allowed to sink them. Takes a few more torpedoes, but there's nothing the Kaga can do at this point to prevent this from being a victory. As Stealin's team reach 1,000 points, the Kaga survives to survive again in another match, and that's game over and a victory for Stealin in the USS North Carolina. Sadly, the old girl herself was decommissioned in 1947 and placed in reserve, and struck off the Naval Register on the 1st of June 1960, where she was slated to be broken up for scrap. Fortunately, she was saved and preserved as a museum ship in Wilmington, in her home state of North Carolina, where you can visit her today. And honestly, if you live in the USA, a country that has the biggest and best collection of preserved battleships in the world, you absolutely should. Stealin, congratulations on your victory. Everyone else, I hope you enjoyed today's video. As always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.